Jared Polin, phronosphoto.com, and this is a review of the Sigma 200mm f2 DGOS sports lens. Now, this was a dream lens for me back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, when Nikon had a 200 f2 and Canon had a 200 f2, and way back in the day, Canon also had a 200 1.8. It was a dream lens for portrait shooting, and back in the day, it was more of a dream lens because you could have a wider aperture in lower light situations when we couldn't push the ISO as far or when we were shooting film. So an absolute dream lens, but this is the first one to come out in the mirrorless world, and Sigma is the first one to do it. So I had a couple of weeks to spend with this lens, so I was able to run it through its paces, where I did a portrait headshot shoot for one of the models that helped us out at a Phronos Photo boot camp. I, of course, had to photograph a kid out in the park because it's always fun to have a good subject. I took it to a low light situation where I shot a concert at a smaller venue, which this is not the ideal lens for there, but still came out with good results. And of course, I had to take it out to the baseball game to see how something like this handles in a real world situation. Now, I did all of that on a Sony A9 III, and I did it all handheld. So this lens is currently available for two different mounts. You have your Sony E mount as well as the
Mount Alliance.
Maybe someday it will come to Canon's RF and maybe even to Nikon's Z mount, but as of now, it's just those two mounts. So let's take a look around the outside of the lens, talk about the feel, the buttons, and everything else about it, including the weight. It is a very nice looking lens. It feels stable and it feels substantial because it is part of the sports line of lenses that Sigma has. They have contemporary, they have art, and they have sports, you know, with an actual S on the end. As you can see, it is a white lens, which matches what they've done with their 300 to 600. So you can have that. They talk about thermal dissipation of light. I don't think that stuff ever really mattered, but this is the white that they went with. Now, in terms of weight, this comes in at 4 pounds or 1,800 grams. So it does have some heft to it. Now, in comparison to Sony's 70 to 200 2.8, this thing weighs in at 2.3 pounds, and Sony's 50 to 150 weighs in at 3 pounds. Now, if you're looking at the 70 to 200 and carrying around, of course, it's going to be smaller, it's going to be lighter than something like this that is massive. But of course, there's differences because you have a 70 to 200, which is a zoom at 2.8, and this is a prime lens at just f2. So going around the rest of the lens, you have your screw-on lens hood. I kind of like the click-on version more so than the screw-on, but that isn't a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. You have a 105mm lens cap right here at the front. We're gonna put that back on. It's one of those squeezy ones. Your lens collar is built in. It has an Arca Swiss plate already built in. If you want to take it off, you're gonna have to get out some tools to take it off. Personally, I would take it off because I'm not using a monopod for this at all because I can hand hold it. Now, if you decide that you want to shoot video and you want to put it on a tripod, of course, you're going to want to go ahead and keep that on. And in those cases, if you're going to keep it on, you can flip it and rotate it up like this and have it on the other side so it stays out of the way. Now, also, when you go ahead and rotate it, you can hear the click stops at 90 degrees. So you have that option to hear the clicks in between so you know when the lens is centered on those 90 degrees. There's a whole bunch of switches on the side of this lens. You've got your click and declick because you do have the option for an aperture ring, but the aperture ring also has its own little switch to allow it to lock. So you can unlock it, you could have it click, or you could have it smooth for the aperture, not something that I personally use. You have a C1 and C2 for custom. You have your optical stabilization set to off 1 and 2. You've got, of course, your focus limiter and your autofocus to manual, as well as 3 customizable buttons on the side of the lens. All in all, this is a nice feeling lens, and you would expect that for something of this caliber, and that is pretty much the outside of the lens. But I did notice it doesn't have a drop-in filter at the back, but you have a 105mm filter thread at the front of this lens. Now, for those of you who think you could pick this up and throw a teleconverter on it, well, you cannot put one of Sony's teleconverters on this, just like the other Sigma lenses that are offered. But let's jump into some of these portraits. The first shoot that I did was a portrait shoot outside here, and I got a really cool model. He was awesome. He had a really cool look, and the 200 f2 is one of those amazing dream portrait lenses, but it's always been out of reach because of the price. I couldn't afford the $6,000 back in the day and had to decide, like, would you get a 300 2.8 or 200 f2? What's more versatile? Or do you just stick with the 70-200 because people won't really know the difference? Those are the things that always went through my mind when I was making that decision if I should pick something up. But a lot has changed, and especially with Sigma being able to get the price where they got this price, it's much less than the $6,000 or $6,500 from way back in the day, but we'll get to the price at the end. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by B&H and their Payboo credit card, where you pay the tax and B&H pays you back instantly. Now, there's two ways you can save. One, like I just said, you pay the tax and B&H pays you back instantly, or two, you can get 12-month special financing of purchases of $599 or more. Now, I personally choose to save the tax, but both options are great options to have. Now, I save tax on everything I order from B&H, from cameras to lenses, like this big-ass piece of glass from this video, you could save really big, or hard drives to TVs, computers, and even film for Big Bertha. Whether you spend $10 or $10,000, those tax savings add up.
Low on cash, but still need to get your boo? Don't worry.
For more information and to apply for your card right now, head on over to the link on the screen or down below in the description. And remember to always charge responsibly. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, in terms of portraits, I think it looks fantastic. It is nice and sharp. It creates a very nice background look, but you would expect that because you're looking at something that is f2. The horizontal portrait looks absolutely incredible to me. Now, I wanted to throw him on a slightly different background. You can see that this is in a playground, but you can't tell that it's in the playground, but you have some green color in the background, but you can barely see the wall. If we were to shoot that at 2.8 or f4, that would be more prevalent. And that's where the f2 comes in handy if you're doing those types of portraits where the background might be distracting. It's going to be less distracting at f2 than it is at 2.8. Speaking of f2 versus 2.8, I do have an example out at the baseball game where we have the catcher in focus at f2, and then we have the catcher with the 70-200 2.8 from Sony at 200mm at f2.8. Now, is it the best example for showing you the differences in the background? Not really, but you can see the differences slightly in the background blur. There's more with the f2 than there is with the 2.8, but this becomes more prevalent when the background is closer to the subject that you're photographing, so keep that in mind. Now, one of the concerns you might have with a lens like this is how close can I get to the subject to focus? What is the closest focusing point that we have? Well, in this case, you can get within 5.6 feet or 1.7 meters in order to get something in focus. That is a lot of distance to be, but remember, it's a 200mm lens, so you can't expect to be a foot away from your subject and still get focus. Now, to counter that, this Sony 50-150 has a close focusing distance of 29 inches. So slightly different, but I bring up the 50-150 because at the end of this video, I'm going to help you decide, is it better to have the 50-150 or is it better to have the 200 f2? I like to give you guys different options so you can decide on your own which one is right for you. Now, moving over to the skate park where our model was riding a little bike through the puddles, and all around the skate park, I got to test out frames per second as well as how is the continuous autofocus. Is it fast? Well, being that this is a sports version lens. It has HLA motors, which are super fast and super accurate. Very similar to what you would find in the Sigma 300 to 600. It is super fast and it kept up with the subject no matter how many frames you threw at it. Now, in terms of how many frames per second you can throw at it, we know that there's a limitation on Sony cameras that Sony puts on Sigma lenses that are mounted on those Sony cameras, and I was able to get just over 17 frames a second in one situation and 16 or 16 and a half in another situation. Now, if you are a Panasonic shooter and you throw this lens on there, you will not get the same limitations. You will get the full ability of that camera. Now, I couldn't get the full ability of this camera, the A9 III, because that's 120 frames per second. So that is one of those trade-offs you need to keep in mind when you're using the third-party lens like this on the E mount of Sony. But nonetheless, it did a very good job tracking the subject coming towards the camera and then off to the side and away. It didn't miss. It is highly accurate. Now, speaking of highly accurate, our model Asher over here decided to do one of those movie star poses and, you know, pull his glasses down. And I was like, said to his dad, I was like, did he just do that? Unfortunately, the focus locked on the rim of the glasses and then hit his eye after the glasses were out of the way, but that I think is more user error and not so much the lens in this situation. So this lens was a big hit at the park. I was very happy with the results and images that I got. Now, to show you the background bokeh, I have a close-up shot of my niece. I went over to the summer camp and I took this photo, and you can check out the bokeh balls that are showing up in the background. You can determine for yourself if that works. You have 11 aperture blades, so if that's something that is important to you, you can see exactly how that looks right here. Now, back in the day, like I said earlier, having the ability to shoot at f2 was highly important when the ISOs of our cameras did not go higher. Today, it's not really that big of a deal because we can push to 40,000 if you really need to and still have it be usable. But I did take this out to a concert situation at a smaller venue to photograph my buddy Archawa. Go look him up on Spotify. Archawa is very good. And his older band was Illinois, which was a great band as well. Now, being that it was a smaller venue, 200 millimeters was much tougher to photograph with because I couldn't get further to the wall. I couldn't get further to the back. It just wasn't the best situation. But when I did get these nice tight shots that were headshots, like this one, for example, thankfully his hat was pulled up and got some of the LED lights in his face. He looks super sharp and super nice. The background, totally obliterated, but you can still see that they're stage lights and that it's a truss, so it's not distracting by any stretch of the imagination. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you how we can help speed up your RAW workflow and give yourself a great starting point with our custom Lightroom presets from FroPack 4, starting with Blues Clues, followed by Brooklyn. We have C41, Coppertone, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, and Wet Hot American Summer. But a throwback to FroPack 3 gives us Mentos and Mount Airy. But new and exclusive to FroPack 4, we have 4 custom adaptive Lightroom presets called Face Enhance, Full Body Skin Enhance, Eyes Only Enhance, as well as Background Blur. So look, if you want to speed up your RAW workflow, give yourself a great starting point, or you're just tired of other people's presets sucking, as you can see, our presets do not suck. That's why we created 14 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at froknosphoto.com/FroPack4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you want to save even more, you can get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, back to the video. And another point to bring up is back in the day when you shot wide open at f2, you were not always guaranteed to nail your focus because there was so much back focusing when it came to shooting with DSLRs or SLRs back in the day. Nowadays, with IAF, you're rarely going to miss focus even when you shoot wide open. Now, just for fun, I took this out to the baseball game. Now, why is that, Steven?
Why?
Because it has an S on it and it's meant to shoot sports. So I took it out to the baseball game to shoot sports. Now, in some situations, it could come in handy because 200 millimeters from the third base side where I shoot the batter is a really good focal length for making sure that you can get the batter, some action, as well as the crowd and the stands going nuts. If someone so happens to hit a home run, like Kyle Schwarber did when I was there, you can get the shot of him hitting the ball and the ball going out, as well as him running down the line and all of the fans starting to rise out of their seats. And I do have to give a big shout out to Sony and the A9 III, because when Schwarbs was rounding second base, there is a whole wall of LED lights that are perfectly perfect in the frame without any flicker because of the global shutter of the A9 III. Without the global shutter, you are getting flickering in that board in the background. Now, in some situations, this might not be the ideal lens for baseball, as it might be either too short or too long, depending on where you are, but not versatile enough. So at the end of the day, it comes down to who is this lens for and is it right for you? You have to ask yourself the question, is a 200 f2 too limiting? Is it too big when you compare it to a 70 to 200? This is much easier to carry around. This is much harder to carry around. Now, when it comes to price, this is a sub $4,000 lens, give or take. A lot depends on tariffs, and that's changing all of the time. It's an expensive lens, right? But it's less expensive than what it was back in the day when you were spending $6,000 for something very similar. Some other things to chew on right here. A 50 to 150 is $3,900. That is an f2 native lens, and you're gonna take advantage of the full power of the A9 III or the other Sony cameras that you're using. Speaking of versatility, there's also the 70 to 200 that comes in at $3,000. A 135 1.8 is also another option you might consider at $2,200. And you're still gonna get something that is a fantastic portrait lens, and that's what I used when I photographed Bernie on the tour for the cover of my first book. Personally, for me, I find it hard to spend this amount of money for such a limiting lens for what I do. If you need portraits at f2 and you are okay with carrying this around because you're doing those family portraits and you're doing those weddings where you think it comes in handy, or you're doing those graduation type photos, this might be a great option for you. Me personally, I'm probably taking the money that I would spend on this and investing in a 50 to 150 f2. That is more versatile to have the zoom but still have that f2. That's me. Maybe you guys think something different. Let me know down below which one you would go with and why. But two more tests. We have a sniff test and a wind tunnel test. Let's start with the sniff test. Yes, Benjamin Franklin's kite. What a great smell that is. Now the wind tunnel test, ooh, this is a tough one with such a chody lens. It failed with flying colors. So look, Sigma made a fantastic lens. It is a dream lens, but some dreams are not meant to be if your pocketbook doesn't match or this just doesn't fit your needs. So thank you guys very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.